Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a good Friday afternoon. Welcome to the Make Your Mark HIM. And if you are joining us, it is the inaugural Make Your Mark HIM, where we have three gentlemen who have given up their afternoon to spend the next hour with us. We have Dr. Rohan Ambersley, CEO of Massy Gas Products, Tyrone Wilson, founder and CEO of iCreate Limited, and Rhys Campbell, Director of Business Operations at Flow, Jamaica. So we welcome you. I'm Jacqueline, your host for the next hour. And I know some of you are probably on the road, heading home. Maybe some of you are at home already or still at the office. Either we're happy to have you. Why Make Your Mark HIM or MYM-HIM? We believe that men are important to our society, to our businesses, to our homes, and we want to look at the personal and professional development of our men. So this is one vehicle that we believe will help to move the needle and to have a conversation going. So MYM-HIM is really a conversation just for an hour with men who are intentional about their lives, who understand business, family, and so on, and community. So I'm not going to say anything more than start with our gentlemen. And the topic, of course, for today is Men on Purpose, Rising to the Occasion. And Rohan, I want to start with you. How do we, as Jamaicans, especially men, rise to the occasion? What do you think is happening in our society? And do you think men are rising? If not, what do you think your role would be?
Thank you, Jackie. Let me greet everyone who is joining us, and let me greet the other men on the platform, Tyrone and Rhys. So interesting topic, Jackie, that idea of men rising to the occasion. There's a lot of conversation around, what men do and whether men are in fact rising to the occasion. I want to say as a general principle that I think in many ways, men are in fact rising to the occasion. The unfortunate reality is that sometimes the occasion to which we rise is not the occasion to which we should rise. But I think it is, what I'm pointing to is the capacity of men to do things and to get things done. I think just to refocus on the positive side, I think one of the things that we need to acknowledge is that there has been a lot of progress. I think sometimes the negatives allows us to close our eyes to the positive. And I'm of the view that we do not do a sufficient job to shine light on the positive, so much so that what appears like the only thing that is a reality is the negative side. And I want to say that I see, as I seek to get into my children's life and attend, PTA and go to their concerts, I see a lot of fathers who are showing up. In my environment at work, I see many men showing up. I see men striving to do better. At church, I see men stepping up and trying to step into spaces. So certainly there's a lot more that men should be doing, but I want to start there. But I believe there are many men who are in fact moving in the right direction and are stepping up in family, stepping up in business, stepping up in the community. And while I recognize the need for more, I believe I am certainly seeing genuine effort and many times exceptional efforts at stepping up, and many men are doing well. And I want to start by acknowledging that progress.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Tyrone, what do you think? How do we change that perception that exists that, you're deadbeat dads, deadbeat men? How do we change that perception? And I mean, let us be realistic. We only have 85%, we have only 15% of the university population being men, and maybe 30% of the people in management are men. So those are real statistics. So, but how do we change the perception that men are doing better? They need to probably look at things in a different way. How do we change our perception with the population and women? You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes. So Thanks everybody for tuning in, and good day to my fellow panelists, Rohan, Rhys. Nice to be on the panel with you guys. Jackie, one of my views on this, right, is that family culture, as I would put it, in not just in Jamaica, but around when it comes to Black, countries like Jamaica and other nations and so forth. I think historically, we're kind of battling with two things, right? We're battling with the history and perception, and also the initiatives to change those perceptions. I think on a history perspective, we have been disadvantaged, right, or race, because we didn't grow up with that kind of cultural mindset around family and men playing the roles and so forth from as far back as slavery. You have your family and it's uprooted. Your son or your daughter is sold to another plantation, or the father is sent to another plantation, or the wife is sent, or you can't have families, or you can't be together, right? And I think psychologically that has impacted us for decades after. And it became a real problem for us as a race, right? And in Jamaica, I would know we are specific to say as a nation. But I think we have made significant strides, right? And even though we have been severely disadvantaged as a result of slavery, I think, this is the time now to be more aggressive in changing the mindset. And changing the mindset begins, for example, with programs like, such as your program right now that we're on, where we can have real, unfiltered conversations about, males and their role in society. Because, even though there have been, I wouldn't even use the term marginalized, but there are more females in some areas than men. It's the same on the other side, where there are more men in some areas than females and so forth, politics. And one of the things, even though there are a lot of females and middle management posts, and I have a problem with the issue that the matriculation, how many of these females become CEO and chairpersons and so forth, but there are men in those positions too. So I don't think I would sound the alarm just yet in terms of is there an underrepresentation or marginalization and so forth. I just think we really still need to have these frank conversations, because we have a significant gap, a severe gap, as it relates to the role that men play, in their personal lives and even in professional life. We're not doing enough mentoring of young men, especially those in inner city communities. And so I've been fortunate to go to the best all-male or the best high school in the country.
I was just waiting on you to mention that. College. But anyway, I'll let you get away with it. Rhys, I mean, I'm glad that Tyrone mentioned that about let's not sound the alarm. But the statistics show that men are really falling off the track when it comes to education and things like that. But what do you think your role, or, I mean, you're at Flow. I know you have foundations, you work with a lot of communities. What is your role, or do you think the employer's role, the business community, what's their role in male empowerment, if at all there's such a thing?
Thanks, Jackie. Before I answer that, there's just one thing I want to add to Tyrone's point. Tyrone made a very solid point about how our sociology or history or societal construct, or how that kind of creates a lot of the kind of situations that we see our men in. And one of the things that I will never forget from my university days, which are more behind me than they are in front of me. Kudos to you for your recent PhD. I should be calling you Dr. Coke Lloyd and not Jackie right now. Congratulations. It's a major achievement. Extremely proud of you. But
Rohan as well.
Oh yes, of course, and Dr. Ambersley as well. Yes, congratulations as well.
With that.
Yeah, that's fine.
We're still Jackie and Rohan, not to worry.
Dr. Jackie and Dr. Rohan. All right, we can work with that. So one of the biggest challenges I think that we have in our societies, not just here in Jamaica, but across the Caribbean, is this theoretical construct of tie the heifer, loose the bull. So in a lot of the families that we have in our societies, we have this notion where boys must run up and down outside and girls must stay inside and do work and they must focus. Girls must be in education, boys can be outside. And I think in a lot of places that creates a kind of environment where it's uncool to be a nerd, it's uncool to study, it's uncool to take your education seriously, to take whatever you're doing, your vocation seriously. You must be outside and playing, etc. And I think if we kind of go back to basics and really just kind of reinforce to our boys, it's okay to be bright, it's okay to be a nerd. There's nothing wrong with being a nerd, trust me. Then we'll be able to see some of these falsehoods, these misconceptions broken down. And if we fast forward now to several years later, looking in the workplace and in the business place, back to your original question, Jackie, I do believe that companies and large companies, small, medium, you name it, we all have a responsibility to just ensure that we are doing everything we can to create environments where men and women feel on an equal and maybe equitable basis that they can contribute to the workforce. I'm always of the view that we need to find a way to balance what we do in society, and we need to balance who participates and what and when and where. And as we move towards, let's call it a new decade, we need to kind of recommit ourselves to ensuring that the future that we're building is one that is inclusive. It's one that that really ensures that men and women have the opportunity to take advantage of all of the digital age and the digital the fourth industrial revolution that Tyrone always speaks about. So I actually feel that is really, once we really kind of knock away at some of the theoretical and societal underpinnings, we'll be in a better position to really take advantage of what the new world is telling us out there.
Mm. All right, I just completed a study on this issue of, the paucity of males. And a few things came out. The thinking is that if you have a male and a female in the home, the money is spent on the young lady because she's a better horse, as they would say. So she's more focused. She's a better return on investment, because the boys are slower, they take longer, they're going to be running up and down. They're probably, girl is finishing her CSEC at 18, he's finishing at 22, probably. So and mommy is probably alone in the home, so she's going to spend it on the girl, and the boy gets left behind. Two, he's not going to have good grades as a girl, so he is not eligible for many of the scholarships. How do we change that paradigm? Because how do we balance our society? Because I have two sons and a daughter. And I know, like Rohan, you have what, 3 girls? The reality is that who are they going to marry if they want to marry? Yeah. Because we want to, we talk as if being unevenly yoked is not a joke. And that is why we have domestic violence and so on, because people are unevenly yoked. How do we get our men to move in a direction? How do you have respect between the sexes? Because not all men are going to go to tertiary institutions, and not all women. Because if you look in the years gone by, many men did not go to university, but there was respect between the woman who might have been a professional. How do we bring that back in our society? How do we look at that? I don't know if Rohan, you want to take that. I mean, who has that responsibility to bridge that?
Yeah, a couple of things I want to say, and I think Rhys and Tyrone made excellent points. I think, Tyrone made the point, and I think it's a very practical point, that we have to be very intentional in how we groom and grow our young men. This idea of mentorship cannot be a foreign idea. I think it's something we have to take up and be very intentional around. Rhys talks about some of the sayings that are explicit and sometimes implicit, but leads to a particular conclusion. I believe there has to be collective responsibility for the transformation that we seek. And no person or no institution should consider themselves excluded. I think part of what we sometimes do, quite unfortunately, is that we like to divide the blame but not necessarily responsibility. In other words, I like to point finger and say, you must do it. But when it comes to responsibility, I'm not pointing on myself, So part of what I feel is that more companies have to do it. I think companies and business places and entrepreneurs have to, entrepreneurs have to seek to mentor young men to become entrepreneurs, and managers and leaders must mentor other men to become leaders. But I also feel the home has a major responsibility. Mothers have a major responsibility. We have to be careful what we're saying to our girls and what we're saying to our boys, because some of the things we say to our girls and to our boys add to dysfunctions in our society later on. I think musicians and artists must take some responsibility. What we sing and how we portray a man's role versus a woman's role is also part of the challenge. School, all these institutions of socialization, formal or informal, I think we have to step up to the plate, and we all have to do better to create a better society. I think this issue of lack of respect has become endemic in our society, and I think it really points to how we have perhaps collectively failed to raise up this issue and deal with it the way it should be dealt with. That we all have value, and irrespective of your role, whether it's a gender difference or a professional difference, respect is fundamental and should be carried on all along. And that message must be sent by everybody.
What do we think of the education system? Another thing that came out of the discussion or the research that I had was that the young men thought the education system wasn't catering to them. There were a lot of female teachers. The curriculum wasn't designed for them. How do we look at that as male leaders? What do you think? I mean, Rhys, you want to take that on? I know.
Yeah, sure. So, I think, firstly, COVID-19 has given us a great opportunity to have a reset and a revolutionized way of thinking about our education system. One of the things that I'm very concerned about is that our education system was always made for face-to-face learning. Fact, right? And now that we've kind of moved into this online world, and we're eventually going to be in somewhat of a hybrid world, that's the reality of where we're going, where there'll be some amount of online and some amount of face-to-face. It says to me that, a huge component of getting better at it is saying, okay, our boys learn like this, girls learn like that. Understanding that there are different kind of learning styles, learning activities, and using the differences to really kind of ensure that we have a more wholesome or encompassing kind of pedagogy, that we use pedagogy to ensure that we have the right kind of training and education for our boys is actually very important. Because a lot of our children have been out of the classroom for, let's call it a year, almost going 2 years. I believe that the triumphant return to Jerusalem, to the classroom, has got to, and we've got to ensure that we get it right this time. And we've got to ensure that we're really focused on looking at how our children learn, what works, what doesn't work, what works in an online setting and what works in a face-to-face setting. So I think now is actually a great time. If they're the same symbol for opportunity and is the same symbol for crisis in Chinese. So it's a great opportunity for us to kind of reflect on that. But there's another component of what you've asked, Jackie, that I just want to kind of wrap up my point by saying, I think it's incumbent on our men to really ensure that they are using language that the younger boys or men can understand, right? Because I think when we think of mentorship, it sounds like this big formal concept that is just, it sounds like you have to have achieved your final destination to be able to mentor. And that's actually not the case. Because so many people struggle with the same kind of story and the same kind of same journey that you have. You have three of us here on this panel, and we have three different journeys, we have three different paths. And I am sure that my path may resonate more with someone, Tyrone's may resonate more with someone. So, and similarly, Dr. Ambersley's will do the same. So when you kind of look at even how we speak about mentorship, it's such a big word. It just sounds so daunting. And it's more about having conversations just like this, where we get the opportunity to say, hey, look, you may not have all the answers, but what's more important is that you keep trying to find the answer.
Tyrone, you're in the education business. What is your thinking on this? How do we revolutionize how our men, our boys are educated, trained, mentored? What have you been seeing on your end when they matriculate to you? What are some of the issues that you're finding that you think we need to address?
Well, one of the things that we did at iCreate really is that we didn't really follow the traditional type of education programs, right? So we weren't as hard and fast on some of the matriculation requirements, because obviously people are coming from different backgrounds. They have different ways of demonstrating their knowledge and skill sets. So we had a process where we're very flexible with the matriculation. But one of the things that kind of pushed us to building out iCreate was around, being relevant to where we are as a society. And it's more difficult for some other institutions to adapt as quickly as possible because of how, large their programs are embedded in the various institutional offerings and so forth. It's a little bit more difficult to change. But what I realized, like when I was at Jamaica College, and we spoke about the mentorship and diversity in how we educate individuals, males, for example. At JC, I was struggling first to third form, right? I got in, I did common entrance. I got in at JC, and I was a top student in primary school, but I was struggling for the first 3 years. I had a couple of classes that I did well in, right? Like the history and so forth. But then I reached fourth form and I had an accounting teacher that started a kind of competitive way of learning, right? So if you have a top average for the month and you're the top student, you're the prime minister, right? And then you have the cabinet, and that's ranked based on your average. So based on your end of month exam and your practicals and everything. And what you found is that all of us who were struggling, right? It kind of ignited a competitive spirit in us as males. We started to compete against everybody in the class because everybody wanted to be prime minister. You want to be in the cabinet, right? The highest average in the exam, you get a box orange juice, and comes last to buy everybody orange juice, bag ones, and the prime minister, the box one in the class and everything, right? And then you know what started to happen? Everybody started getting high grades. And this kind of ignited something in me. It reminded me of how I learned. And how I learned at the time, it was through being competitive. If there was nothing to gain, I was not interested, right? So if there wasn't a ranking, something to lose, something to gain, or whatever it is, I was not interested. So that kind of competitive environment, it worked, right? For example, it worked amongst the boys. Might have marginalized a few because they were a little bit more shy, or they didn't kind of know how to exist in a competitive environment, but it still built everyone. And that's that was not a program at JC. It was the teacher at the time that instituted such a program, and other teachers, right? So our history teacher began to follow that. They had their own different ways, they gave it their own touch and everything. But what happened is that you realize boys being around themselves and everybody want to shine, everybody want to be competitive, right? And I think we have to, and it's not just the kind of psychological part of it, but it's just really challenging, with implementing real and relevant scenarios in learning and finding ways to tap into the spirits of the males that will get them to thrive in a competitive environment.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is said that men are by nature competitive, and I'm wondering if we're really using that in the classrooms. I know it's done in sports, but are we using it in the curriculum in a meaningful way? I'd like us to look at women empowerment. Do we believe that the empowerment of women has affected how men see themselves?
Repeat that.
There are a lot of women empowerment programs and girls feel empowered. Do you think these programs have affected how men see themselves?
Well, it shouldn't, if you don't mind me jumping in, guys. I don't. How I see it, Jackie, is that you know, in every aspect of society, different groups, whether gender groups, racial groups, professional groups, whatever it is, you know, have their own struggles. And just like our Black race, females have had struggles too, especially Black females, because on top of being Black, right, they were females. So historically, again, from slavery coming right up, and even when you know, a certain race was now free, women still didn't have certain rights, and they were still placed in a box as to what they can do, where they can go, how they can behave, and so forth, even when the race aspect of things were progressing, right? So what you find is that there had to be programs that promote female empowerment, right? And it shouldn't stop, because we still have that problem. We still have parts of society, we still have people who feel that a woman belongs in the kitchen, at the home, taking care of the kids, can't reach to the top as a CEO because she have to go home at a certain time to prepare dinner and those things. So we still have to have those female empowerment programs, and us males also have a big role to play in leveling the playing field. So yes, we have our challenges, but overcoming our challenges shouldn't mean making it harder on another group in overcoming their challenges. So we need all of those programs.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here,
Sure,
and add to what Tyrone has said. I think he's absolutely right. The empowerment of one should not mean the disempowerment of the other. And I think certainly in the case of men have zero reason to be disempowered by the empowerment of women. I think as Tyrone rightly said, we should be actively playing a role to lift up our women and to celebrate our women, even as we seek to lift up ourselves. I don't think the two need to be separated, and certainly does not have to be at the expense of each other.
okay.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that point. I think there's a major activity and role that we as men have in all of this. We have to understand and understand our privilege. We have to own our privilege, in the sense that we have to understand that some people may be looking at things a certain way, and you know, we may not be, we may not see it. So it's like a blind spot. It's a huge chunk of self-awareness. And I think the first time I kind of came across in the workplace where I realized I was able to do something that a colleague who is a female could not do, I was upset about it, and I didn't realize, and it really upset me, because I was calling to do, we're both reaching out to someone. She was calling and she was not getting through, and I called and I got through it, but then I realized that, you know what, it shouldn't be that way, and I don't want a world like that. I don't want a world where my nieces, where women can't have the same kind of opportunities and access that I have, because of how they're born. And I think that kind of hit it home for me, and it made me be a lot more aware of the kind of language I use, the kind of things that happen, and to be able to spot it a mile out and be able to call out my colleagues on it and just say, you know, that's not fair. You can't make a statement like that or a comment like that just because you're a man. So there's a certain amount of self-awareness that we have to have. There's a certain amount of ownership and accountability that we all have to have as well. In other words, of saying, hey, if you hear something that is wrong, you can't be on a Zoom call, because that's what 2021 is about. If you hear something that's wrong, you need to say, no, that's wrong. It's unfair for you to say that. You can't treat your colleagues like that. You can't say that. So that's a huge chunk of responsibility that we need to kind of own and look ahead at trying to resolve for the future.
Okay, or I'm really happy to hear that. But our society is not functioning in a way where the sexes respect each other. How do you as leaders impact that or change a narrative? How do we do that? Because the reality is that any business that we have, if you have a dysfunctional society, we will not grow, we won't become rich, we won't become the kind of world that we want to be, because it's dysfunctional. And we're seeing that every day in the violence, whether it's domestic, the number of cases of whether it's rape. And so what is it that we need to do for as male leaders? How do you think, what do you think your role would be in your community, your organizations, your family? I mean, and then the next thing we're going to move into is your own personal purpose-driven way of living. But in the meantime, I want to just talk about that, because as people say, there are several Jamaicas, several. You have men who are doing very well and they live good lives, they raise their children well, and then there are those who are not. How do we bring that, gentlemen? Believe me, it's something that bothers so many of us.
I'll just jump in. We're gonna move from, I'm not sure if you guys, if your eye can run like mine. So I'm at the top, then Rhys, then Rohan. You guys are okay with that, right?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tyrone. In my icon, I'm at the left and then we go this way, but that's all right.
All right. But listen, I think we have to lead by example, right? It starts with individual responsibility. We don't need a situation where everybody have to be on board at the same time or having the same thought process at the same time, right?
But Tyrone, where does that come from? Because I mean, Rohan mentioned it earlier about the music and so on. How do we move in that direction for people to say, okay, this is unacceptable?
Some simple.
Is it a value system we need to build in our country? How do we do that? What do you think?
Well, for me, it's probably easier for me than for a lot of people, because I just do not see it like that. Like, you know, when you look at my company, for example, historically, we've been represented in a balanced way, you know, from the board to leadership team to the team in general, right? I've had a few female chairpersons. Currently, we have a female chairperson and a couple other females on the board. We have a female general manager, a female CFO, you know, and as leaders, you know, we have to almost see the need to ensure equity in how we lead, right? And that is how I see it. So we really have to understand, listen, there's an issue and we need to play our part in solving it. So when it comes to leadership, you have to put the females in leadership position too, and you have to speak about empowerment. So in my workplace, for example, one of the things I'm big on is female empowerment. I'll send messages on International Women's Day, even before, you know, but I'll have special sit-down sessions with the females, for example, in the workplace, understand how they feel, where they're going, what are their career outlook, how can I support that open doors more than I will sometimes even for the males. But if I have males in the workplace that are more marginalized, for example, like me, like they come from an inner city community like me, for example, I'll have special programs for them too.
But
So,
why do you assume that the men don't need that level of attention?
no, they do. But, you know, men tend to be more, you know, loud in a workplace than the females. And in my experience in my company, that's what I'll see, right? They'll be quicker to jump at an opportunity, to want to take on something. Not saying they're more capable, but I see that, you know, in the workplace. So sometimes the females, and it's just again that kind of psychological impact. They might want to feel that they need to take the back seat and so on. You have to, as a leader, you have to push them also, because what you want is everybody competing at the table. You want everybody to have a seat at the table and being represented at the table.
But do we believe that we are because I mean, I think I heard, was it the proven CEO today said that he's so disappointed in the candidates he's seeing, the male candidates, whether it's resumes or those candidates in general. He's so very disappointed. So how do you ensure that there's balance if you're not getting males into your workplace? How does that happen? I don't know, Rohan, how does that happen? Because as an employer, how do you do that?
Yeah, I want to make 2 points, Jackie. One in relation to the previous question, and then answer this one. I think the issue of how we conceive competition, you know, Tyrone made an excellent point about the value of competition, but I think sometimes we make competition unhealthy because we misinterpret the game.
Exactly.
Simon Sinek likes to talk about the finite game versus the infinite game, and the game of life being infinite. That you know, in a finite game, somebody has to win to lose, but in an infinite game, we can all win. And I think that's a big point, that sometimes we put people at cross purposes when the truth is you can do well, too. You can pass and I can pass. You can succeed and I can. And I think we have to continue to represent that, so that there can be, you know, more collaboration, greater unity, and a greater sense of common purpose. I think that's important. That issue of the quality of candidates is real, and I think it goes back to some of the institutions that prepare people. I think we have to be very deliberate in what we do. I think at the school level, we have to begin to point our men to what quality looks like, and our women too. I think we have to continue to expose our young people to global thinking and to global standards, and having people benchmarking themselves with the best. You know, I have 3 daughters, and I tell them very directly that I want them to develop themselves to compete on any stage. You know, Tyrone said about it. I grew up in an inner city community as well. And let's be clear, part of what we have to tell our inner city youth is that it doesn't matter where you're coming from. You have to come to a point where you recognize that you can be the best. And a significant part of my life came out of going into some places and recognizing, whoa, I can do this. You know, or what they told you was not true. You can compete. I remember going to Canada to do an executive program, and it hit me again like it did when I went to several other places, and just the recognition that I can do this, and where I come from is not a limit. You know, I think that's something that we also need to celebrate. So if we don't begin to send those messages at school and in communities, you know, many of our young men and young people continue to underperform, and we need to mash down the lies and let our people know that they can succeed, they can do well, and your history does not hold you back.
Agreed.
Gentlemen, how did you, in terms of purpose, how did you know your purpose? How did you, I'm assuming that you're living your purpose, because, you know, many people, we're in a job, but we're not living the purpose. We just like what we do, and we continue to do it. I've heard somebody 50 told me the other day, well, he's not sure if that's his purpose, but he's doing it anyway. But I'm assuming you guys are on a path and this is your purpose. This is probably your gift. How do you walk that? How do you walk with that with integrity? And what would you say to a younger man coming up and those who aspire to be?
Rhys can take that one.
I guess based on Tyrone's screen, thank you. Well, so the first thing is, the key thing about kind of
I want all of you to take it, so not to worry. It's coming to you, not Tyrone. But go ahead, Rhys.
The key thing about finding your purpose is really understanding what gets you out of bed in the morning, right? And it's not the alarm clock and it's not the paycheck. There's a certain point where you reach in your career when you stop and you think, do I want to do this? Is this something that I'm excited? Do I feel this fire in my belly for it? And generally, when you find that passion, when you find that purpose, getting up or doing whatever you do, it just doesn't feel like work. It just feels like a normal day. Like, you're just getting up and doing something that you love. I know it sounds cliche, and I know that someone who is listening to this right now said, yeah, that sounds like something I've read in that book. But, it's so true. The minute you understand and you have a serious, tough conversation with yourself, because that's another part of discovering your purpose, having a tough conversation with yourself and saying, this is what I see as, this is what I like, this is what my passion is. And your passion doesn't necessarily have to be a job, and your job doesn't have to be a passion. But if you find a kind of balance where your passion is your job and your job is your passion, believe me, you will know it and you'll feel it. So the key thing that I would want to say is take the time to do some introspection and think about what it is that moves you. What is it that you enjoy doing? What is it that when you do it, it just feels like you're your natural self? Being your authentic self is one of the most important pieces of advice I've ever gotten in my career.
Well, how did you do that?
Well, first of all, it kind of made you stop and think that, you want to hold on to the aspects of your personality that make you, and you also want to be professional. And if you can find an environment that allows you to be your authentic self, that allows you to come up, show up and be who you are, be the kind of leader that you are, and embraces you, then that's generally how you unlock your passion. So if you're in an environment, be it in your church, be it in whatever kind of societal group, human beings ultimately want to belong, want to feel comfortable with each other. And there's a certain amount of vulnerability that you develop and grow when you're in a group or a setting where you can be your authentic self. Once you tap into that vulnerability and you tap into that, this is who I am and what my purpose here is. Once you do that, then the rest is almost history. It's like you no longer look at the clock. You no longer realize that you've been sitting, doing work for everyone here has long hours. And I'm sure if you were to ask Tyrone and Rohan, if they think that they do long hours, they probably wouldn't even notice. One of the things we were discussing yesterday, Jackie, is that, a lot of times, one of the challenges about working from home is that you don't even realize you've not had lunch because you're on calls and you're kind of doing so much that it just doesn't feel like work. So I want to actually just zoom in on one of the principles that Rohan mentioned, Simon Sinek, and he spoke to me. I listened to one of his talks and he spoke to me about finding your purpose. And the thing is, not necessarily chasing what you do, but really going deep and understanding why you do it. Why do you want to do what you do? And I asked myself that question and I said, all right, if I had to explain in one sentence, why do I do what I want to do? Because I literally want to be a part of history. I want to be part of a new Jamaica, a Jamaica that is forward thinking, that takes into consideration a digital revolution, that understands the role and importance of our women, of our girls, of our men. That's the kind of Jamaica I want to be in. And that's what's going to get me up every morning, to get up. I'm not a morning person. I've said this several times, but for me to get up, that's what wakes me up in the morning.
Rohan, what's your take on that? I mean, what kind of tools do you use? I mean, you mentioned earlier where you're from, but what kind of tools have you used to get you where you want to be? What kind of motivation? How did you do it? I mean, talk to us.
No, I mean, purpose is big for me, Jackie. I've always spoken about purpose. Rhys is onto something when he talks about your why. And I want to recommend a couple of things that have been very beneficial to me. So Rhys talks about, you know, sometimes people saying, you know, that sounds like something I've read in a book. You know, let's be clear. I value books. I mean, I have benefited from reading people. So I'm living in one space, but I'm able to access another space just by reading what somebody else had to say. And books have been a major part of helping me in forming how I think and what I do. So reading is big. If you can get your hands on good books, get your hands on good books. I know we can listen to them, but don't follow people who are some of the things we will never be able to live all the experiences, everybody. If you have somebody you admire, a leader that you know, if you're in business and you admire a leader, get that book, read it, because you will learn a lot. I benefited from reading books. I've also benefited from relationships. You know, for me, and Rhys said it, mentorship is not something I've flown and out of this world. I benefited from some good people who were able to just say some positive things in my life and show me some good examples. If you can find good, solid people who care about you, you know, form those relationships and build on it. And it's not about being superficial, you know, we just want to know that person, you have to move forward. You know, it's about forming genuine relationships where you can learn. I benefited from that as well. If you can get involved in good organizations where you get exposure to people, you know, people who can help you. That may be a church. I benefited from that as, you know, in terms of my own formation, whether you want to get involved in a service group or some kind of, I mean, I know other people, I know Tyrone would have benefited from those kind of relationships. And I feel that's important. And you know, I benefited from that in my family. My parents were very clear. My mother would have drilled education in my head constantly and would have spoken about, you know, she tells me, you know, this is about, you have to get your education, because your education will keep you from some other shans that you don't want, keep you from starvation and degradation. You know, that's important. And of course, I think there were big times in my journey where I spoke to myself. I was clear about who I wanted to be. I was clear about where I want to go. And up to now, Jackie, every single day, I make decisions about how I want to show up, about what I want to do in terms of where I want to go. And it's a constant work because I'm serious about making a positive contribution and being the best I can be. And some of those things are things I employ and apply.
Thanks. Tyrone, you want to jump in?
Sure. You know where I'm going with this. Find a purpose when you go to a school like Jamaica College.
I'm really going to charge you, though, you know, Tyrone. I'm really going to charge you. Maybe you should have taken up donations for Jamaica College on this program.
You step through the gates, you'll see the #1 school in the country, right? I use that example really because, you know, finding your purpose sometimes it's about a mindset. It's about a deliberate attempt to make something of yourself. And sometimes we define purpose as a specific thing, right? Like, okay, I want to be the CEO of NCB or something, right? And we think that is our purpose. But purpose is about, you know, that more of that fulfilling that mission statement. You know, you want to empower others. You want to impact lives. You want to serve community, right? It's about that kind of, you know, like for me, coming up, we spoke about, you know, growing in the inner city and those things. From day one, for me, it was just about making something of yourself, right? And you can't define that or put something specific, but it was just about living a positive life, competing. This is for me, right? Competing, trying to be the best at anything I'm a part of, and you know, making my parents proud, Right? That was it. Very simple. And that type of purpose pretty much fuel everything else. So no matter what you're a part of, you find that you want to be the best at it. You want to make your parents proud, your siblings proud. You want to, just be the best. So that type of definition around purpose for me, just coming, everything that I've done, everything that I've tried to do, it was just being, persevering, because when you start to feel that purpose and you go through a period like COVID-19, right, where everybody around you losing their jobs, people facing financial difficulties, business closing, the psychological impact that will have and so forth, is that kind of definition that will keep even a country going during times like these, right? So that is how I look at purpose, really. I think once you put a kind of mission statement around your life and what you're doing as a professional, that will just drive you regardless of the circumstances. The job will change. The company might shut down and you move to something else. You might need to migrate and move to another country, right? Circumstances will change, but the mission statement for yourself as an individual should remain.
So everybody should have their own mission statement. Huh?
I think so.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think is very key for us to remember is that this new paradigm that we're living in, this new age, this new era, has made information a lot more accessible, right? Someone on this call mentioned that they took common entrance and they instantly aged themselves. I won't call any names. So Tyrone, you spoke about common entrance. I took common entrance, and I'm sure Rohan took it as well.
I didn't do it.
But here's the thing. A lot of the information that I find boys have access to these days, I didn't have it. I didn't have the most powerful device of the 21st century, where if I was just sitting down and thinking, gee, what is it? What's the official language of Vanuatu? I could pick up my phone and use a search engine and figure that out. I mean, I literally had to go and look in an encyclopedia and look for the letter V and read it and say, oh, okay, so I do think that in this new age that we're in, it's really incumbent on our boys and our men to really take advantage of a lot of the information that was no longer accessible to them. I mean, Rohan said it quite rightly, read. And I actually want to push back on that, and I said, it may not necessarily be a book. It might be an article. It might be just looking how another society views or sees or understands a different perspective. And the fact that you can literally sit down and just use your phone and it takes you to a completely different place within a couple of seconds. So just to me that, we really need to use technology for a force of good, rather than just forwarding WhatsApps and these videos and just scrolling mindlessly through Instagram. Let's challenge ourselves. Let's challenge, if you're here watching this, challenge yourself to find something from an author, John Maxwell, Simon Sinek. There are tons of people out there. There are videos you can watch on YouTube. Challenge yourself to do something that you've not done before.
I was reading an article today on why people are not rich. I don't know if any of you saw that, but let me just look at it. It says why there are 5 reasons people are not rich. I mean, this is quite controversial. It just, the gentleman who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he said we're not rich because of fear, because of cynicism, because of laziness, because of bad habits, and because of arrogance. 5 things he said why we're not rich. And Jamaican men speak a lot about that. And one thing that has come out is that many of our men fall out of the system because they want to be rich quickly. They don't want to finish school. Everything is going to be, I'm going to, bust a tune. I'm going to do something and I'm going to become rich overnight. And as gentlemen who have been there, you've done the toiling and so on. Riches comes in many forms. People think it's money, and it's not about money. but being rich in whether it's your values, your spiritual growth. I mean, what do you think about these 5 things? Fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and of course, arrogance. I don't know if you, Rohan, you want to look at that. Because I found it quite intriguing, these 5 things.
Sure.
And as I said, I don't want to talk about rich being money. Rich is, of course, part of it is having money, because you can't do anything without money. But how do we become rich as men? How we live in our families or our lives? You know?
Yeah. No, I find that intriguing in terms of the article. Now Kiyosaki has written several excellent books. But I don't know, you know, I know some arrogant people who are rich, and I know in his context he's talking about money. For me, I'm very, very cautious of those kind of generalities, the 5 reasons you're not rich.
Right.
Because once you take that kind of approach, you can begin to point to people who are quite cynical, who are in fact rich.
Exactly.
I mean, we take that for what it is, a generality. I think though that there is value in the thought process. Clearly there are people who could be made wealthy if they were a little less fearful. There could be people who could be wealthier if they were a little less arrogant or a little less lazy. Those issues are taken. But I think part of the point you're making too, in terms of, it goes back to the sense of purpose and the sense of trying to make life as best as you possibly can make it. I think when you make money your goal is when it becomes problematic. If it becomes a byproduct of something that you value, it perhaps is a lot more fulfilling. I think we all take the point that there is value in money, but I think it's important, and I wrote on this, Jackie, that there's value in values, and if you can extract value by living out real solid values, I think it's a lot more sustainable, and that way. If you can achieve certain financial objectives by ensuring that you remain true to who you are, and money is a byproduct of that pursuit, is a lot more beneficial than trying to seek money as an end in and of itself. Because when you seek it as an end in and of itself, very often that's where the talent comes. And I think that's a big thing. If you want to be wealthy, that's a good thing, but seek to add value to the society and allow value to come back to you, rather than seek money, where sometimes, many times, you lose their way.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to stay the last 3 minutes, 3 of you. I know 2 of you have wives. What do you think is what's your purpose as men with regard to your wives and relationships? How do you think other men ought to be looking, and what have you done that works?
Rohan, for sure.
Tyrone, and I was hoping you would go first.
Rohan, you're the man.
Yes, I will say, and I'm sure my wife will is watching, and she will love to.
I'm sure she is.
Yes, she is watching, I'm sure. So watch it.
She's your biggest supporter.
I think it's important at the very basic level to love our wives. I think it's important to make sure, in the same way that we look for support from our wives, we must also be actively loving and supporting and nurturing our wives. I like the idea of cherishing and nourishing, and I think that's important to invest in the relationship, to be very, very, very solid in terms of loving and supporting. And I believe, in the context of home, there's nothing better than to build a solid relationship with family, and obviously a solid love relationship with wife is pivotal. And I try to, one of the things that I spoke about this morning, and I'll do this quickly, is to focus on process and not just content. So not just to say make sure you do this and make sure you do this, but over the long term, make sure you're working on the right things and paying attention to the right things. You won't get everything right, but on the whole, things should work. And I believe love and respect is at the foundation of it.
Mhm. Tyrone?
I say a lot more, but I want Tyrone to come in.
No, so definitely agree with Rohan. You know, in the household, whether you have kids or not, right? Or you really need an environment where there is love and respect. And respect, you know, I'll emphasize the respect part, you know, because sometimes the kind of lack of respect will put into question even the love. So you need an environment like that. But one thing that is critical for me is that the empowerment, you know, empowering my wife to you know, really feel as if she can go out there and achieve whatever she wants to achieve. Choose her own career path, be supportive in that career path, you know, in that professional development, in that personal development, because we know the world that our wives, our daughters will be going out into, right? And when they do go out, at least at a minimum, they should go out with a foundation in their minds that, you know, I have all the support I need at home, whether or not there's support out there otherwise. But that type of empowerment as a husband, we have a critical role to play where that is concerned. And I'm sure our wives will say the same thing, because they do support us too and empower us. But I think our role as males is to kind of be supportive, be respectful, and promote equity in the home. You know, I have a really deliberate approach as it relates to equity in the home. I don't feel as if this is your task, this is, you know, this is a female task, this is a male task, you got earn and you. No, it's a balanced environment, it's equitable, it's supportive, and it's empowering. That's how I look at it.
And Rhys, you want to speak for the single man?
Yes, I do. What I'd like to say is, you know, it's very important that when we start to think about our roles as future husbands, we really take the opportunity to stop and think about what is the kind of environment that you want to be in daily. And I think the common thread with Tyrone and Rohan is that they're in environments that literally love. They're literally comfortable being in this environment because they're with partners that nurture them, that allow them to be their authentic self, that encourage them, and when you stop and you think about that, when we're looking at when you start to think as a single man, what's the kind of relationship you want? You want a relationship that allows you to be your authentic self. And I think that's a key thing that I'm hearing both persons say. So from where I'm sitting, I would say there are two major pieces of advice I'd give to the single man. I would say, listen, you have a purpose. You need to find it. You need to discover it. You need to be in tune with it. Listen to it. You have a place in this world and you have a role to do things differently, because we can't continue doing things in the same way, because that's just insanity. And the only way for us to really kind of make that step as a society, as a generation, as a country, is for us to kind of recognize our individual roles and kind of move towards one common vision, which is to literally make Jamaica one of the best places to live, work, raise families, because it is, hands down. So I would say that is at the core of what it is, and really tap into that inner voice, listen to your purpose. Don't be afraid to be a nerd. If you're a young person out there and you know you feel you have to hide and read a book, don't feel no way. Trust me, it is definitely someone like you who's going to change the world. Back to you, Jackie. Or did Jackie freeze?
Jackie.
Jackie?
Sorry, yes, we're back. Sorry about that.
There you go.
Any last words, gentlemen? Last words to wrap up.
I think Rhys just kind of wrap it up for us.
Lovely.
Not intentionally.
No problem. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us today. It has been, I think, an enlightening discussion for me and all the persons who joined us. We're going to continue to share this content because I believe this is one of the best countries in the world. We have some of the best men in the world. And we're just we're a blessed country, and we don't even understand how blessed we are. And we need to just keep working at it. And it means that both men and women need to continue working together. And as leaders, I see you guys as influencing policy, the programs or legislation. So I'm just going to encourage you to do that in your own space, to look at how we can get our males in more intentional about their lives, so that they can continue to contribute to Jamaica and the world. So have a good weekend. Thank you for taking your Friday afternoon to be with us. And those online, thank you for joining MYM-HIM. And we look forward to seeing you next time. I'm Jacqueline and Lloyd signing out. Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Jackie,
Bye,
take care,
everyone.
my brother.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everybody.
All the best.